You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. And today we have a special guest with us, Walter Block. He is a professor of economics at Loyola University, and he essentially needs no introduction among libertarians. So he's well known among Austrian economic circles. But today we're going to focus, we're going to have a focus show on organ donation and organ markets. It's one of those areas where it's sort of a sticky subject for a lot of people. The idea of putting prices on things like organs, but yeah, Leon, maybe you could bring up the visual on this one. So here is a issue that we run into with things like this when we want to avoid putting prices on things. We wind up with lines like the National Kidney Foundation is saying here that every year 4,761 people are dying, or roughly that number anyways, every year, just waiting in line for a kidney. And so we have the shortage. And it's like, what could be done to help fix this shortage? And it just seems like, people ignore market solutions to their detriment. And so we wanted to have a show on that where we sort of focused on this issue. Maybe is markets an answer to organ transplants and all the deaths that are happening because we don't treat these as sort of a market type of item. And so I'm going to put it to you guys, I guess. What are the main objections to having a market in this area?
Well, Walter will tell us, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's my turn. I didn't know who was on this. The main objection to this is a thing called commodification. There are certain people who believe that you can't buy and sell everything. There are certain things that are non-commodifiable. And one of the things that's non-commodifiable would be organs. You can donate an organ. I can donate a kidney. I have two. Nobody's going to want mine. I'm 81 years old. My kidneys don't have much of a shelf life. But when I was young, or young people could now donate a kidney, and there's no problem. But if you ask for money for it, somehow this is not acceptable. Same thing with prostitution. It's legal for some people to go to bed with other people, but if they charge for it, it's called commodification, and you're not allowed to do that. I would even say that there is such a thing as selling yourself into slavery. Would be a violation of commodification, because they say that human freedom is not commodifiable. The example I like to use in this to show the foolishness of that is, suppose my son, God forbid, had a horrible disease and it cost $50 million to cure him. And I don't have anything like $50 million, but Bill Gates wants me to be a slave. And I would become a slave, and I go to his plantation, and he gives my son's doctors the $50 million, and I value my son's life more than my freedom, and he values my servitude more than the $50 million. So that would be a justification for voluntary slavery. But that's a very difficult topic and probably deserves a show of its own. But this is the general idea that you're not allowed to sell things. And according to libertarianism, anything between consenting adults. And you should be able to sell your sexual services. You should be able to sell your blood, your kidney, your heart. Whatever, and you should certainly be able to sell yourself into slavery. Well, that's a debatable issue among libertarians. So the main objection to a market in kidneys or livers or hearts or blood, even blood transfusions, is that there are certain things that are just not commodifiable, and therefore it should be illegal.
Walter, so one of my heroes, Milton Friedman, once spoke about this very issue, about a market for human organs. And if I'm not, it's been a long time since I read the paper about it, if I'm not mistaken, he was against a market for organs, because he believed it would incentivize murder. What are your feelings about that?
Well, if Friedman said that, he'd be wrong. And I'm going to prove that with a little bit of supply and demand analysis. And first of all, I'm going to draw a supply and demand curve. Here we go. There is price and quantity. And let's make sure that everyone can see that. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Wait, maybe I'll do it with a thicker. Maybe I can do it better with this. Now everyone can see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So
P on the
everyone-
vertical axis and Q on the horizontal axis.
Q
Yes.
on the horizontal axis, we're getting back to Economics 101.
Yes.
And price on the vertical axis. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the supply curve of organs, a given price. And the way I'm going to draw the supply curve of organs is like that. And you notice I put a horizontal part of the supply curve. This shows that a certain number of people will voluntarily, at a zero price, donate their organs. And
Okay.
a lot of people, when you get your motor vehicle license, what you do is you sign a card, and it says that if somehow you're in a motor vehicle accident and you're about dead or you are dead, people can grab your organs and transmit them into other people. Okay, so there's the supply curve. And as with usual with all supply curves, it slopes up to the right. And the higher the price, the more the supply. In other words, if I offer you $1,000 for your kidney, I'll get so many people. If I offer $10,000, presumably I'll get more. If I offer $100,000, presumably I'll get more people. So the supply curves slope in an upward direction. Now I'm going to stick in a demand curve. Whoops, I got to keep this straight here. And now we have a demand curve. And by the way, the distance between point 1 and point 2 is about 80,000 in the United States. Namely, there is a shortage of about 80,000 kidneys. The amount supplied is a certain amount, that's at point 1. The amount demanded is at a different point, point 2. And the difference between those 2 points is about 80,000. It varies, but it's around 80,000, and that's a continuous number. Okay, so now the question comes, what would be the free market price of an organ? And the free market price of an organ in equilibrium would be where the supply and the demand curves cross. And that would be at, I'm going to make it 0.3. So here we have 0.3. Does everyone see that? That's 0.3.
Yes.
That would be the free market point. And what Milton Friedman, I can't believe Milton Friedman is so bad on this. He is a libertarian. He's not as rabid a libertarian as Murray Rothbard, my own mentor, or me, but he is a libertarian, and no libertarian worthy of the name libertarian should really oppose a free market in organs or anything else for that matter. Although there is a debate about voluntary slavery, as I said. Okay, so that's 0.3. And what the critic is saying is that 0.3 is going to be a high point, and it's going to be maybe $50,000 to just pick a number out of the air.
Yes.
And in many countries, let alone the United States, murders are committed for less than $50,000. So I'm going to put 50 over here to indicate that that's the price is 50,000. And the argument that they're making is people are going to go grab other people and grab their organ. And if they're nice, they won't kill them because they have two kidneys, but they might grab their heart or their lungs or their liver or whatever. I think you can do with part of a liver, but certainly not without a heart. And they're going to grab it. So what's wrong with this argument? What's wrong with this argument is we have to ask, what is the black market price of an organ right now? How do you get the price of a black market organ right now? And the way you do it is you extend a line vertically from 0.1 up to the demand curve. And now we get to 0.4. Well, notice that 0.4 is a lot higher, namely the price is much higher than at 0.3. And I'm going to put 150,000 there to just indicate that it's triple. The point is that right now, the black market price, given that we have such a shortage of organs, is much higher. So paradoxically, and contrary to the critics, people will be safer. There'll be less murder, not more murder, less murder, because I'm assuming that the murder rate is proportional to the price. Namely, the higher the price, the more the murders will be. Look, if you offer somebody $50 to commit murder, even a hitman is going to say, "What? $50?" You offer him 5,000, and he might say, "You offer him 50,000." Look, supply curves slope upward. Supply curves slope upward not only for organs but for murder. The service of murdering people is a thing that economists can depict on a supply curve, and the higher it is, the more murders we'll have. Well, right now we're going to have murders at the rate of 150,000 or 0.4, whereas if we had free enterprise, there'd be less murders, fewer murders, we'd be at 0.3. So that's why, now I can't believe Milton Friedman is guilty of this. I'm sorry, but the pinkos, the commies, the socialists are certainly guilty of that. And they would say that, that's what they would say, but they're wrong. Now, I just wanted to add one more thing while I'm on a roll here, and that is, why is it so important to have organ markets? I mean, if you have a market in rubber bands or paper clips, that's important, because if you don't have it, you'll have a shortage. But paper clips, what the heck? You can hold paper in some other way with a staple. But organs are very important. Now, what I tell my students at Loyola University is that the synonym for economics is cooperation. Right now the NBA is having the finals in which basketball team is the best. And if the star won't pass the ball to one of his players sitting right under the basket and not covered, that team is going to lose, and even if the star is very good. Namely, cooperation is very important. Well, cooperation is important in all team sports. When you have an orchestra of 100 people and they're playing 64th notes, cooperation is very important for them to all play in the same place. Now, for basketball, you have a coach. For an orchestra, you have a conductor. But we can conceivably have cooperation for 8 billion people, all the people on the earth, even without a conductor. And that's the magic of the market that Adam Smith was talking about with the invisible hand. Like if the price is high, that shows great need, and then people are going to produce it. We can cooperate in a team of 8 billion or 7.5 billion, however many people we have, theoretically. So where is the cooperation failing? The cooperation is failing right here. You know what they call motorcycles? They call them donor mobiles. Yeah. Why do they call motorcycles donor mobiles? Because who drives a motorcycle? Not guys our age, but guys in their 20s who have really good organs. And they die very quickly, not from cancer where all the organs dissipate, but they've got perfectly good organs. And now they smack up and they have to ask their parents at this time, can you please give us some organs, because we've got 80,000 people that need a kidney. And the parents are busy crying because their son just died. So what you have is perfectly good organs going into the cemetery. And then other perfectly good people who are missing the organs also going into the cemetery. I think, Jason, you mentioned it's something like 4,000 people a year die out of this.
In the United States, yeah.
In the United States, out of this waiting list of 80,000. So what you have is a magnificent, horrific lack of cooperation. Because if we had a free enterprise system, the organs would go from the motorcycle driver, God forbid, someone dies, but better to take their organs than not. and it would be put into the other people, and now you'd have cooperation. But when the government gets in there and prohibits markets, you have lack of cooperation. And to me, the beauty of economics is shows cooperation. And here we have the absolute abnegation of cooperation. You have people going into the cemeteries unneeded, and then you have organs going into the cemeteries that could have saved their lives, and they're dissipated. They just go into a cemetery where they do no one any good. So this, I think, is the case why we need a market, not only in everything, including paper clips and rubber bands and everything, but particularly on something so important as kidneys or other organs.
Well, Walter, one of the things that's driven home in all this too is that there's a market for doctors, there's a market for hospitals, there's a market for all the other participants in this exchange, except for the donor. He's the only person who can't somehow participate in the market, and it's just absolutely absurd. And like you were saying, 80,000, I think somewhere around 80 or 100,000 is the waiting list. I wanted to draw your attention, and maybe Leon, you could bring this up. And this is a much lower value here that we see, but Iran apparently has had a program where they will compensate. So it's hardly a bastion of free markets in Iran, but they at least have recognized this idea that, hey, maybe we should compensate the guy who is the only one not making a profit in this whole thing, the donor. And for very modest amounts, they've cleared the line. They apparently don't have a line in Iran for kidneys, and it's just they're talking here in this particular article is from 2017. It was organ donation programs across the world, but they're talking here. It's literally like around $1,200 from the government, and I think they will compensate up to an extra $2,300 to $4,500. They were saying back then. So, just absolutely astounding the lives that can be saved just by compensating, cooperating, I guess you'd say.
Thank God for Iran. I mean, Iran is the bastion of free enterprise, at least in this one limited area. This is just grotesque. I mean, the idea you can give an organ, a kidney, to your brother or to a stranger, but if you charge for it, then that's no good. I mean, why should charging make a perfectly licit activity, transferring or transplanting an organ, into a crime? This is just socialism run amok.
It really hammers home the point. Socialism kills.
It really does. It really does. Even though, Jason, I'm a little bit skeptical about any kind of information that comes out of Iran, because they know nothing about free markets there, and I'm wondering how, even if their lines are cleared, I wonder how they achieve that goal. I wonder how many people the prisoners they took out and forcibly remove organs and that kind of stuff. I don't think there's some sort of cooperation in close to anything that Walter is talking about in terms of developing a market for these kind of organs. I seriously doubt it, but
Well, Leon, Cato and many other people have sort of talked about this issue with Iran. So this isn't like we're just finding some, weird article from CNN, that's totally fake. This is pretty real stuff, but it does sort of drive home that point that, and also too, why would you compensate them if they were just prisoners as well? So I don't think there'd be, and that's one of the things we see in China, by the way, is that, you actually have a situation where people are paying for organs, and sometimes they're coming from places where people aren't freely choosing to donate those organs. I think here we have a graphic here, and this is from McMaster University, but they're talking about how many people every year are killed in China for their organs, essentially so the government can make a profit, I guess. But these people, Uyghurs and some of these others who are put into these places, they don't have any choice in the matter. So, Walter, what's a libertarian to do about things like that happen in a market when you have these bad actors who are taking stuff by force like this? Because this would certainly be one of the things the socialists might jump in and object to.
Well, we're now talking about the libertarian view on the death penalty. And I'm going to draw another picture for you. And the picture, first of all, I'm going to have a murderer and a victim. And the murderer is smiling because he is still alive. Can you see that?
Yeah, Walter, you're our Bob Ross of economic charts here. You're just making the world a better place with all your drawings.
Does everyone see it?
Yep.
Yes, we
The
can.
murderer is smiling because he is alive. And
Leon, maybe you could take away the vision. There we go. Now you can see it a little better.
He just killed his victim, and the victim is frowning because he's dead. Now, I'm a big fan of Robert Nozick, an eminent libertarian philosopher who's always coming up with weird machines. Well, I'm coming up with a different weird machine. And the weird machine is it transfers the life out of the murderer and into the victim. So we press a button, and out goes the life of the murderer, and it goes into the victim. And now, so this is before, and this is after. And after, the murderer is now frowning because he's dead. And the victim is now smiling because the victim is now alive. So we have a before and after picture. And I can't write before because I didn't leave enough room for that. But the top picture is before, and the bottom picture is after. And the question is, would we be justified in using this machine on a convicted murderer who we're going to put to death? Well, you're darn tootin'. I mean, look, if I steal your car, certainly the punishment should include, it should be much worse than that, but it should include me giving back the car to you. And if I wreck the car, I have to give you my own car or something of equal value. Well, what the murderer did is he stole the life out of the victim. He took it. He's a thief. He's a thief of life. And we're going to take his life and put it back into the victim. And I think that would be entirely justified. So the death penalty is justified. And there are some people who say, well, you shouldn't have a death penalty. Well, now they say that a side order issue is they say the death penalty will not reduce murders. And they're right. Based on statistical analysis, what they did is they took all the states in the United States, and some of them had a death penalty and others didn't have a death penalty, and they looked at the murder rate, and they held constant everything else they could think of that would be associated with murder, like age of the population. People my age don't commit murders much, but people 22 commit more murders. So they held everything constant, and they got no results. And then they concluded that the death penalty doesn't help. But then a former colleague of mine did a different study. He said, forget about the death penalty. Let's look at the execution rate. Because there are some states like California that have a death penalty, but there are a bunch of pinko judges and they never executed anyone. And he said, let's look at the execution rate. And he did the same analysis, same econometric analysis, and he found very strong evidence that executions will reduce the murder rate. So executions are justified not only pragmatically, but also deontologically, namely because justice requires that the criminal pay back what he stole from the victim. And if what you stole from the victim was life, and we have this machine that will transfer life out of you and into the victim, well, then by gum and by golly, we should use that machine. Well, if the murderer's entire life is vulnerable to punishment, well, then certainly his kidney should be. So I support the Chinese, assuming that they really have criminals there. I mean, a lot of countries have criminals for victimless crimes like prostitution or gambling or not obeying or whatever. But if you have a serious criminal, a rapist, a murderer, a thief, sure, I think that his organs would be Maybe not his heart, because then that would be the death penalty. But for a lesser criminal, taking his kidney or blood or something like that, I think would be justified deontologically and also on a pragmatic basis with regard to the death penalty and the execution rate. In one of my articles, what I said was, not only should we have executions, but we should have public executions. Right now you have executions in a small room and only 10 people witness it, they should be on TV. And that would put a crimp in the murder rate.
Well, one thing I wanted to bring up. Sorry. Go ahead, Leon.
So, Walter, I'm just trying to understand that you saying that as a punishment for taking a life, a prisoner should be willing to give up some organs, whatever, maybe a kidney, maybe whatever the state designates. Is that?
That's like the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't. I'm an anarchist. I don't trust the government to do anything.
So this is what I'm trying to understand.
I'm not saying the government should do it, but I'm saying it should be done by the forces of law and order, which should all be private. And we don't ask for the permission from the criminal. Look, take a murderer. Why should the murderer have life in prison for the rest of his life? If we have this machine, we should take his life. And given that we don't have this machine, I don't see why he should have 2 kidneys when there are other people, innocent people, who are going to die without one of his kidneys. He's a murderer, for God's sakes. We shouldn't ask him. We should take the. Let's get back to this other diagram where we were afraid of people taking other people's kidneys. We should take his kidney.
Well, one of the things, I guess we're getting pretty close to the end of the show, and I guess would you want to how would you summarize, I guess, Walter, the whole issue with this complete waste of lives that we're seeing, in markets and organs?
Well, I think the best 2-word summary is socialism kills. and what we have here is socialism. They have a hatred for commerce. A man and a woman go to bed with each other, and that's legal. Consenting adults, and one charges the other for it, and it's not always the female who charges the male. Sometimes it's the reverse, and all of a sudden it's illegal just because money changed hands. They have a hatred of commerce. But commerce is good. Commerce is the Robert Nozick used to say, a capitalist acts between consenting adults. The left favors acts between consenting adults, supposedly. And what Nozick is saying is, how about capitalist acts between consenting adults? Why prohibit them by law? Well, because you have a hatred for commerce. You have a hatred for the market. You have a hatred for freedom. You're a socialist. You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
Well, socialism kills. That's a great place to end everything on. And by the way, if you like this show, we interviewed Walter Block on a previous show, so you can find out a little more about him, how he came to liberty, and all that. So definitely check that out. And thanks so much, Walter, for joining us on this episode. And thank you out there for joining us as well. Until next time, stay tuned and stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.